Welcome, everybody, to the first Black Mental Wellness virtual conference from surviving to thriving. We are so excited to have this conference with you today. I am Dr. Cammack, and I am the president and CEO of Black Mental Wellness, and one of my co-founders. You want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Danielle Busby. I'm also a co-founder of Black Mental Wellness, and I'm the vice president of public relations.
And so we're excited to have you all here, excited for a day of conference sessions and presentations about Black mental health and wellness. We recognize that news just came out, so we were distracted backstage. And so, of course, we're going to talk about all things politics, because quite honestly, that does impact our health and wellness, particularly for Black people, and seeing the power of the Black vote during the most recent election. So we will most definitely add that to the conversation. We are Black Mental Wellness, so we're a corporation of clinical psychologists, and our mission, our goal is to decrease the stigma of mental health in the Black community. We are passionate about making sure that we all know more about how to keep ourselves healthy and well. And we recognize that 2020 has been a particularly difficult year for so many of us. And so we thought, why we have been invited to so many conferences, presentations, trainings, and Danielle and I sort of have a rule, like when we do presentations together, like we know that we're an add-on, but we're going to show up so Black that we're going to be our unapologetic selves. And today we just wanted to create a space where we're not the afterthought, we're not an addition, that this conference was developed with Black mental health and wellness in mind. We will be incorporated throughout this in the speakers, in the sessions, in the topics. And so we want you all to enjoy. We hope you learn something, add to the conversation, ask your questions. We do have just a few things if you haven't used this platform before, to get you started. So if you see on the left, there's something that says reception, and you can click on that and it'll give you the schedule for the day, and it will tell you which sessions are live, what time they're coming up, so you can plan out your day. We're on the main stage now, and as you can see, it says live, but then at each hour, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, there will be sessions. And so you can click on that sessions tab, see what's happening. The beautiful thing about Hop-In is, like many conferences, you can hop from one session to the next. So if you want a little bit of this session and a little bit of another, you can visit sessions that are all live at the same time. As a reminder, everything will be recorded. So we'll also send you the link. So all registered attendees will get the links to the session so you can watch later. And the last two things is there are networking opportunities throughout. So please go network, meet some people. You never know where those connections can take you. And there's an expo. So we have 15 small Black businesses that we're featuring in our Black Parade Expo. So go shop, spend some money in the Black community. Most importantly, in each, I think each hour, so like 12:50, 1:50, 2:50, there will be live vendors. And so the vendors will be there to answer your questions, to tell you about their product so that you can learn more.
And we actually just had a live vendor session with Kawan Glover. And so we're really thankful to him for kind of starting the conference off. So you can always go back and look at the booth and see, if you missed the live session, you can always see their videos or whatever other marketing materials they have included. And so we are so excited to have you all here. And I think we should go ahead and get started with the first session. So this session is titled Homecoming. We were really inspired to really have a space, again, that was just for us. And we wanted to be able to launch this and really talking about what type of year this has been and all the ways in which we feel like we may have just been kind of making it and trying to survive. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Nicole to introduce our first speaker on our panel.
Okay, so I had to, first of all, she came personally recommended. So I had to look her up, and I was like, okay, she's working in the field. And I think, I'll just read some of what about you. So Thea Monyee is an accomplished, self-identified Black woman creative. with credits including appearances on HBO, BET, OWN, Fox Soul, and TV One. She has performed at the legendary Ford Amphitheater and House of Blues in Los Angeles. Her unapologetic work stems from her unwavering commitment to healing and her belief that true healing can only occur in a liberated and non-oppressive society. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist who has contributed to online publications such as For Harriet, Unspoken, and Black Girl in online publications, co-host of Them Black Mamas podcast, kinship partner of Black Mamas Matter Alliance, and art contributor to Project Row House's 50th round on race, health, and motherhood. She's also the solo host of Shaping the Shift podcast and director of decolonization for the multimedia platform Black Girl Mixtape and co-creator of the Free Joy Experience. And I'm telling y'all, this is just like a snippet of the work that she's doing. So we're so excited to have you here and tell us about both what you're doing, but to add to our conversation today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, especially with this news.
Yes.
And now I want to have the pleasure of introducing not just a professional colleague of mine, but also a very dear friend, Dr. Jessica Jackson. I'm going to read her official bio here. So Dr. Jackson is a licensed clinical psychologist who divides her time between clinical practice, mental health advocacy, and research focused on racism and mental health equity. In her clinical practice, she delivers culturally responsive, evidence-based treatment to adult clients with a wide range of emotional, behavioral, and adjustment problems. Dr. Jackson is an assistant professor at Baylor College of Medicine. She also has a private practice in Houston, Texas, and regularly provides local and national workshops, seminars, and webinars on culturally responsive psychological treatment. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Jackson. We're so excited to have you contribute to this conversation. And I'm just really happy to have you both here as our, homecoming initial session. And I'm just ready to jump in.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to kick it off, Danielle?
All right, I see people are in the chat. I want everyone to know that for the event chat, not the event chat, for the stage chat, you could go ahead and drop thoughts or questions. It sounds like some people are having a little bit of technical difficulties there, but it seems like the team is taking care of it. All right, guys, so just to begin, what would you say to those who feel like they have barely survived this year? What would be your thoughts, your advice? Let us know.
Well, first, can I just say I'm grateful to be here. And an apt title, Homecoming, and we talk about thriving. We have a Black woman that's going to be in the White House, y'all. Like, that is something to celebrate, right? Like, that is a Howard graduate right there, right? And so then to be on this panel of Black women on the same day that this is happening, I think this is thriving, right? And to answer your question, Danielle, I would just say that it is, for many people, it has been a rough year. And when we talk about going from surviving to thriving, I think one of the things is we have to think about what thriving means for us, right? I think there's been a whole lot of self-care has become really niche, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's like self-care, coping, all of this. And I'm like, also, y'all, it's okay to just feel, right? That we don't have to cope with everything. Because when I think of coping, it's like, how do I get through this? And that it's okay to just feel. And that's what I would say to people, that it may have been rough, and that's okay. You're human. And to experience that, because you also, when you can experience sometimes the lows, you're also experiencing the highs, like a today. And I think if nothing else, today is evidence that things get better. It may take a long time, right? We've lived, a decade in the past 8 months, but it gets better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, what I would add to that, thank you so much, because I definitely feel like that conversation around we can hold more than we sometimes give ourselves credit for, that we are expansive, right? And so for me, I'm a deeply spiritual person. I practice Afro spirituality. And so, I had a series of dreams going before this stuff even started revving up in 2020. And the confirmation kept being, it's going to look rough, it's going to look scary, but you all are uniquely prepared for this moment. I can't think of another group in this country that is more prepared for moments like this than us. I've been posting all day, like in Black Women Land, this is a Thursday. This is a Wednesday. You know what I'm saying? Like we really have the built-in capacity for so many things to be true at the same time, to hold so many things, to hold our joy at the same time that we grieve. The real thing comes down to, what Dr. Jessica Jackson was talking about is permission, self-authorizing yourself to be and feel all those things without any fear of what the outside world is going to think about it. And I think part of what allowed us to self-authorize in 2016 was seeing them numbers roll through. And we was like, oh, it's like that. So what we about to do for the next 4 years is level up, right? And we have. And so when people are like, what are we going to do? So I said, we're going to do what we've been doing, right? We are going to stay consistent about who we are. And we're going to put our joy first, and we are going to put our communities first. And we are going to allow ourselves to be full human beings, just like Dr. Jessica Jackson was describing, with a full range of emotion, and know that we are uniquely qualified and capable to survive this moment and to thrive in it.
I like that point that you both made, because I think oftentimes we feel like automatically something bad is happening, like we got to fix it. And sometimes it's just, you got to feel it, be in this moment, but also what you're saying, Thea, in knowing that we're made for this, so we can handle it. And sometimes it's just taking that step back, readjusting, taking care of yourself, giving yourself permission to have that joy, and then moving forward.
Yeah. And not everything's happening to you. Much of it is happening for you. And so, again, because I practice Afro spirituality, it's changed the way I see challenges. It's changed the way I see difficulties. When you think about transformation, change, uncertainty, all the things we felt in 2020, that's the energy of Oya. Oya is over rebirth. Who are we becoming, right? That is like that, but you don't know that if you don't know your, if you don't know the culture, if you don't understand the framework through which we saw the world before we were given a new lens through which to see the world. And so part of it has been like this year, I think, has forced us that the lenses we were given, conditioned to seeing through, have been challenged as well. And it's an opportunity to see things a new way.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that, I'm sure that Dr. Busby will laugh. My big thing in life is the both and, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can always have the
mm-hmm.
and, the dialectic. And so I'm like, I think that is one of the things that can help us. Like I can be excited and joyful about the news that we had and recognize that there's still work to be done. I do not have to box myself into feeling one sort of way. And I think that we do that sometimes. It's like, I can't be as nuanced as my situation. And we're humans. We have a broad range of emotions that can change. They're fluid, just like our situation. And I think that can be helpful, is in recognizing that is we can hold multiple things, like you were saying, Thea, at the same time, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't have to do anything about it. We can just hold them and be, and not say, I have to change this. I have to fix this. I have to evolve. I have to grow. No, you can just be today and hold all the things today and recognize that you can grow in the future.
And that piece that you just mentioned, Dr. Jessica Jackson, is important because that's an African-centered value. Right? We learned this or that. We learned binaries. We learned segregation. We are actually an integrated people. Our value system is of integration. Our value is of things being connected and interconnected. So we should all be subscribing to and as opposed to or. It's just that's something we have to reclaim, just like you were saying, because we were given this lens of but. Pick one, by it's like we don't have to pick nothing. We are who we are. We are all, so even in our humanity, we're also Black, and Black is all. Like, what did not come from Black? Right? The universe was Black. The womb was Black. I have to point this out to people. That's science. The color Black includes all colors. So we are automatically that when we liberate ourselves to be who we are authentically are, as who we came to this earth to be, that is exactly what we're talking about. And is such an African-centered value that we have to reclaim.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. I'm just feeling like y'all are like speaking to me directly and feeding me. And, Dr. Jackson, I definitely have taking that advice that you've given around and I think being able to just hold both of them at the same time and name it for what it is, like you said, without trying to do anything, that creates a different level of peace. Mm-hmm. That creates a different level of just like acceptance and like understanding and just realizing this is what it is. But then Thea, I really like what you said earlier when you said everything is happening for you, mm-hmm. not to you, right? Mm-hmm. And these are like these small strategies that, mm-hmm. but they're huge, right? Yeah. Like when you said that, I was like, yes, it's happening for me. My whole energy changes. My mm-hmm. whole attitude about this changes. And so I think that's such a powerful strategy that sometimes when we think, what are the strategies? What do? We see them as these grand things that we have to like figure out and plan. And that's a simple, just change how we're looking at it, right? Mm-hmm. And then back to your point, Dr. Jackson, in regard to, just being able to say, and this mm-hmm. and that's a small strategy. So I'm wondering, as we all are kind of, thinking about these different things and all the things that are happening this year, are there other strategies for you all, big or small, that really like stick out mm-hmm. and kind of speak to the power of like, what can we do in the moment to moment? Because I think we have glamorized self-care to kind of be, bubble baths and scented candles, which I'm all for. And your hair appointments and your nails, all those things.
My hair appointment though, really, for real though, for real. That's real for me. I got shaved sides and locks. I don't miss those.
All of it. I'm here for all of it, but I offer other ways too. So I'm interested to hear from you all what you're thinking about when we kind of say what strategies do you guys think are most helpful for us in this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I posted recently on my social media, and this is not my quote, but I don't know, source unknown. But it's like, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. And that includes with yourself, mm-hmm. right? That during the day, how many thoughts that we have. And I am a big advocate for mindfulness. I do it a lot with the clients that I work with. And a part of mindfulness is not always meditation. It's just being present and being in the moment. And so I'm like, during the day, you have 1,000 thoughts, and those thoughts are impacting your mood. They're impacting how you're interacting with other people. And sometimes just something simple as I can put a thought just like on a cloud and let it float away. I don't have to do anything with the thought, right? I don't have to argue with myself about why I'm thinking a certain way. Should I be thinking a certain way? Why am I doing this? I don't have to do all that. I can entertain and say, I'm having this thought, let it float away. Sometimes picturing it on a leaf as it kind of floats away. And I tell people your thoughts are like children. If anyone has been around small children before, sometimes when they're trying to get your attention, especially if you're a mother, like, mom, 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 and they keep going. And as soon as you're like, I hear you, I'm gonna get you in a second, they quiet for a minute. Your mm-hmm. thoughts do the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't have to do anything for those children. You didn't attend to the problem. You just acknowledge, I hear you. That when you acknowledge hearing yourself and just let it be, that can be helpful too. And that's really, for me, has been really useful because throughout the day, I have a myriad of thoughts. And sometimes I'm like, I will talk myself into a bad mood real quick, right? And then I'm like, I don't have to participate in this conversation. I can acknowledge that this is what I'm thinking and let it float away. And if it keeps coming back, that gives me data too. But if it doesn't, I have saved myself a headache potentially for at least a little while.
Mm-hmm. So bear with me because the strategy is simple, but the framework that it's from is a little bit complex. So I use joy as a metric for everything. My whole life, my business, my work, my purpose is all centered around joy as a metric. And what that means is that if something doesn't bring me joy, I don't do it. I don't do it until I can change, look at it differently, interact with it differently, create a different strategy or pathway that will bring me joy. I just don't do it. It's like literally, I don't. And so for Black people who were separated from their bodies, who were unauthorized from their own bodies, their own culture, their own way of life, right? This is a huge deal. Because in order to know what brings you joy, you have to be embodied. And we do put a lot of emphasis on our minds because our minds are very Western focused. And that's the part that the Western culture tries to constantly attack and invade and colonize, right? But a lot of our truth lies in our DNA and in our bodies, right? We know things because we feel them. We feel that boom back. We know when that drum hits, like it's physical for us. And our relationship with this world was very physical, very tactile, very interactive, very kinetic, right? And so when you disconnected people from their bodies, you disconnect them from the ability to distinguish between their joy and their pain. And you've taught them that they can only identify and recognize pain in their body. So then they flee their bodies, even when their bodies are free from bondage. So embodiment work is so important, whether it's dancing, whether it's, Black-led yoga, because that's different than white-led yoga. Whether it's, doing a juice cleanse so that you can figure out what foods work for you and what foods don't. Like all these things are going to the ocean, going hiking. Nature is a natural healer, but those are things that bring you back to your body, signal to your mind that your body is a safe space, and then allow you to tap into the question, does this bring me joy? So when we do that work, that joy center work, we have to include the embodiment piece. And we have to remember that Black people have a hard time reauthorizing. We were taught to wait for emancipation as opposed to take our liberation, right? And so these are two different ideas. In this day and age, we have to self-authorize returning to our own bodies and then use joy as a metric for whether or not we are engaging things that we want to engage to, not even have to, right? Because we deserve the right to have desire. So if I don't desire to do this, even though you think I should be doing this, I still don't have to do it because I don't desire that. That is a right. Joy is a right. Pleasure is a right. Being in my body is a right. And I think reclaiming those things are to me, the quickest way to liberation. Faster than changing presidents, faster than changing a law.
What you just said, because when you think about trauma work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we talk about how we store trauma in our bodies, and you can do all of this other work. And I'm not knocking the theories because I know what works and all of that. But at the basic level, when you're working with trauma and you're getting in tuned with where are you storing it? How are you feeling? I did a group and we incorporated yoga. And just like the first, I read about this, but the first time we guided the participants through yoga who had experienced sexual trauma, so something that was stored in their bodies, and these were women of color, people started crying because it's in there. So you have to figure out, one, how do you take that step back and even understand what you're feeling and allow yourself to be aware of that. And two, what's the work that you can do to release it? So we do a lot of we talk about yoga, but we also talk about grounding exercises and going out in nature and reconnecting. Because when you do that, it allows all of this other stuff to quiet. And then you can be in the moment in, what you're feeling. But I think something that people struggle with and that comes up in therapy a lot and in conversations and even personally is we have to give ourselves permission to heal. We're so accustomed to that pain. Like you said, it's that disconnect from the body. So all you recognize is pain. That pain starts to feel like home. And that's not home. And when it comes up, it's oh, well, this feels familiar. So let me sort of swim here. I know I'm treading and it's tired, but at least I know what it is. And can we give ourselves permission to get out of that space so we're not always in that survival mode and get to that place of I can heal and I can be happy and I can be out in nature and in tune with my body and feel that joy and it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. Forgive me if I'm sidetracking, but part of that permission to heal and part of our work within the mental health field and what my work really, Nicole, you looked me up, so you probably know, is I'm actually at war with the mental health field right now, actively and intentionally and joyfully, because I'm an Audre Lorde person, right? I do not believe in undoing the master's house with the master's tools. And so I really love what Dr. Jessica Jackson is doing with going back, going through the data, gathering. We've had pioneers like Dr. Jessica Jackson who have said for a long time, this, what y'all call mental health, is not about us, right? You're basically teaching us to cope with the systemic oppression and the pain you caused, and your strategies are trash, and your theories, you don't have to say it, Nicole, I said the theories be trash, because the reality is these are the same oppressors who are telling us how we should function within an oppressive system, and not including our data, our voices, our strategies, our practices, our ancestry, our values. And so the problem comes in, we do all this work as Black professionals in the field to get people to feel comfortable enough to go into a therapist's office. And then it's a game of craps. We don't know who they're going to get. We don't know. Those people are not trained. They're not ready. We all went through that colonized Ph.D. master's program experience. We know. And so it is hit or miss whether or not they're going to get someone who from day one says 90% of the things that you're experiencing are due to systemic oppression. And that's on us, right? If you do that the first session, you then change somebody's life, right? Because I do a presentation, and I have one coming up called Free to Heal, where we're talking about the actual practices, and the APA and the NASW and the, AMPS and CAMP, they will say everything but the word racism. They will say, well, this is happening more frequently in this group, and this is happening more frequently in this group. And I'm sitting here like, why? Why is it happening? It's happening because of racism. If you're a therapist who won't use the term racism, who is scared to say the word Black, you are not going to be able to help Black people. And there ain't enough Black professionals out there to help everybody, right? So I think that's also the other piece. It's like we do a lot of work to get our community primed to heal. And then we could potentially be sending them into spaces where they're re-traumatized because the people there aren't prepared for them. And so a lot of my work focuses on get your stuff together over there, because we doing our part to get our people lined up and ready, but we're not marching them into you, and you don't even know how to say the word Black.
And I think to your point, there is some change though happening in the field. APA had a video that I participated in called Racism in America that I thought it's like a 20-minute video that I think really is just highlighting like there is a lot of literature. This is not new for us. And that there are people that kind of need to get on board because they're not learning it in school, right? Or they're not learning it in their program. And it's one of the reasons that I personally don't like the word cope. When I run my racial trauma groups, I tell people, my thing is like, because my goal is I'm not teaching you to cope is to deal with, to help you get through something. I'm not teaching you to deal with racism. What I am trying to help you to do is to mitigate the impact that it's having on you, because right now that's what we're able to do, right? If I could wave a magic wand and make sure that people did not treat you a certain way because of the color of your skin, I would do that. But when we say that you need to cope with racism, I'm basically saying that you need to deal with this. It's happening, and it's your job to handle it. And that's not the message that I want.
Right. No.
Is that, no, I think it's okay for us to say this is happening. And like you said, I'm taking my power back so it doesn't impact me as much, because we know it impacts our physical health, our mental health, like all of these things. And so to a degree, I'm going to step up and take some responsibility. So that what you do, it doesn't impact my sleep or my diabetes, my hypertension. And I start with a basic question with people. When people are telling me all of these things that they're saying, and I think this goes with what you were saying, Thea, I say, says who? And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, says who? Because you have all these, right? We have put ourselves in these boxes. And I'm like, well, who told you that? And they're like, I don't know. We know this. I'm like, well, if no one said it, then tell yourself something different, right? We tell ourselves, I should do this. I should be this way. Well, who said you should be that way? And if you're not sure who did it, then why are you following the rule of something that you don't even know where it came from? Right? Create a new rule. That's why I agree with what you're saying. Like, we have to be proactive and empowering ourselves to take back our joy instead of waiting for somebody to give it to us.
Yeah.
That we can stand up and say, hey, no, I want to change the way things are happening for myself.
And we are targeting, like you were saying, grad programs, because like, so there's certain realities, right? There's certain, even the mental health, there's certain realities. The mental health that models that we know started in a white culture, started for white affluent people, right? Like everything else here, right? So we are in a time in these 2020s with the Black woman vice president, thank you very much, where we need to really consider, like, are we just adding on to a system, or are we going to ask for that system to rethink its inception, right? We work with the music business too. And we're like, who did you have in mind when you started this label? Who did you have in mind when you started this school? Who did you have? Because I think we've done the part where we've been like, okay, let's getting here and chip away. But we are looking at a time where we can say, listen, we can redefine mental health with everybody's values included. We can do that in this moment right now. And then we don't have to be doing the little add-on, adding little bike lanes here and there. We can change the whole block. We can change the whole street, but we have to ask for that specifically, or else we're going to continue to have another 50 years of trying to can I add this? Can I add this? When it's really like, no, now's the time to recognize all of this was built for white folks. We are all impacted by what you caused, but we all need to heal from it differently. And we believe we are expansive enough as a field to redefine mental health for us, right? For all of us, for people who are seeing their family members at the border being ripped apart, for people who are undocumented, for people who are trans, for people, I mean, we are big and creative enough to do that work now and demand that it look not just on the surface, but in policy, in practice, in structure, in grad programs, very differently.
Absolutely. I wanted to just speak to something that you said, Thea, earlier, and when you were beginning to describe, when we were starting to talk about strategies, and you were like, wait, the strategy is simple, but let me explain this context. Mm-hmm. And I think that piece is so important for us to integrate, right? For us to understand the context, to understand the historical spaces that have really influenced where we are today. And so I really appreciate that nugget of it's not just this one little thing, it's this big thing that we need to all grow and understand. And if we can take those theories and understand and overlay, because some of the strategies are similar, right? CBT will have some piece of this that looks just like that, but it's we got to understand the why. We got to understand our foundational space before we can really make that work for the larger community. But I also want people to know that I am paying attention to the chat, and we kind of went a little way. So I want to bring us back to some of the questions that were here, if that's okay. We have one question that says, so how do we deal with those thoughts and people who make you feel bad for choosing not to participate in something you don't desire? Because we were talking about, getting back to that place of we can have desires. We can have these things that we want and look for. We're not just kind of trying to get by. And so
my first thought is that, one, we have to understand that they were conditioned against their desires too. And when I say they, I think again, pulling back to I'm always going to pull back to the larger context, right? White supremacy is a product of capitalism, these things are all intertangled, right? And so it's not just Black bodied people who are conditioned to behave a certain way. We all play our roles according to how the system was structured, right? And so it's actually difficult for many people to act on what they desire when they've been told this is what you should do, right? And so the first thing is when someone else is seeming to be resistant to you acting on your desire, is to recognize they're coming from the same space, right? Where they were also taught to fear their instinct, to fear their wildest, most untamed, truest, biggest, loudest self, right? They're coming from that. And so often we see in society where there are dominant cultures who are following the rules, who want other people to, and when they don't, they're bad, right? So that's a natural reaction to watching someone do what you want to do, but you feel like you don't have permission to do yet, right? And so one, remember that. Two, then you say, well, I'm gonna show you how it's done because I'm a model for you right now, me not doing these dishes because I don't want to, because it don't bring me no joy, right? So you model it, right? First, you recognize you're not separate from that, but everybody's been trained to be uncomfortable with their biggest, wildest, truest self and truest desires. And so when you go to do it, it looks like, we've been taught that that's scary and anxiety producing, but know that that's not personal, that's conditioning. And now what you can do is set the example for what it looks like to do it and the world not topple over.
Yeah. And I think for us, as a community, as we're bringing it back to thinking about the theme, we have to not judge people when they're living in their truth and giving themselves that permission to live freely, because sometimes people will allow their fear to come on to you. So it's don't do that. They might not like that, it's no, not only is that person modeling it, provide them the space to do that. And then give yourself permission to do that as well.
And I think along with the theme, is the homecoming. So I went to an HBCU, Aggie Pride, for all of us. And here's the thing about homecoming. When we come back home, a part of it is when I come, is I don't feel like I have to explain myself. I get to just be. The thing that we like about coming back to homecoming is when I go back to Greensboro, when I go to homecoming, I don't have to explain to people why I'm wearing something, why I am doing this, why I just said this. And so I think to a degree, we have been socialized to explain ourselves. And that's not totally wrong, because I think about it in adaptive and maladaptive. The generations before us, they did teach us. They said, you know what? You have to work harder than everybody else. When somebody asks you a question, you over give them information, right? That was adaptive. We're in a new season, a new generation. It feels maladaptive. It's no longer working. And so we get exhausted when I have to explain why I'm taking a day off, when I have to explain what's coming up for me. And so, but when I go home, when I'm at, in Greensboro, I don't have to explain those things. And so I think that when we can help ourselves in our daily lives feel like I don't have to explain something, that I can say thank you, period, right? Somebody gives me a compliment, I don't have to say, yeah, girl, I got it done at such and such. I did it.
We do that.
Because we all do it, and we don't even realize how socialized that can help you to then say no. So to answer the person's questions, like when people make me feel bad, a part of it is I don't have to give an explanation. And when I can be okay in that in myself, then that will be helpful. It's like coming home to ourselves. So not just homecoming in a physical sense, but coming home to myself. And I also think about it in the sense of that also gives you data. When you feel bad about the way that you responded to somebody, that's a chance for some awareness and some growth. What part of this made me feel bad? Is it because I wanted to be liked? Is it because I felt like I disappointed them? And that's the area that you can then be able to work on if you choose to. I mean, clearly as a psychologist, I advocate for therapy. Good space to work on it in therapy is like, what did this bring up for me? And I give people the example, I love you. This is something that comes up for a lot of people, is when I say I love you, what was my intention behind it, right? Because if I say I love you and I actually wanted you to say it back, then I actually should have said my need. I want to feel loved. But if I say I love you and I just wanted you to know it and that person just said thank you, I don't feel some type of way that you didn't tell me I love you back, because I didn't want it back. I wanted you to just know, right? And I think that comes up when we're trying to explain to people, when we feel bad about something and explaining it, is like, what did I actually want from that interaction? And being aware of how you feel will help you to understand that better, or have a starting point anyway.
And to feel empowered in asking for what you wanted in that moment.
Yeah.
I feel like this conversation is sort of making me think about, it's almost like what you said, Dr. Jackson, is like, it's a coming home to self. Hear what you've been saying too, like we're coming back to ourselves. So it's making us like strip down from these things that we agreed to, that we didn't even recognize that we were agreeing to, or that were forced on us. How do we separate ourselves from that, come back to who we are, and then start the healing from there, So it's like a stripped down version of everything. I started thinking about like reading the book, The Four Agreements, and it was something for the first time where it made me think about, what are these things that I agreed to that I didn't realize I agreed to? Like, wait, I didn't sign up for that. I just took that on. And I see that my mom is on here, so Mom, don't say nothing. But I see that even in my parenting, right? Like sometimes I'll fuss at my daughter, so she wants junk food, and I'm like, no, you got to eat your food first. And then I'm like, wait, it's all junk food. And I know something so little, but it's something where we just automatically repeat those things that we know that's been given to us. And maybe part of us getting to a place of thriving is, how do we separate from those things that we didn't agree to? How do we reconnect to who we are in this moment, and then start the healing from there? And Thea, something about what you said made me think, like, with this whole decolonizing of mental health, if we get back to it from a perspective, and each of us are doing the work, right? But we change all the way around. I wonder how much of the stigma will change. I wonder.
Thank you. Two things. Dr. Jessica Jackson, I'm loving the way you keep decolonizing the word data. It's just giving me chills, because I think that when we use a term that they think they own, we use it differently. Like, that data is in your body. And the way you keep using it, I am hoping it triggers for people the thought of like I am the research, right? Now, a lot of the research we see in mental health is not centered on us. People like Dr. Jessica Jackson's doing that work. And but the way you keep using that term reminds us. And this is why when I do use a lot of research in my presentations, it's qualitative and it's storytelling. So I'll get stories from people because that's how Black folks share data. We share it in our bodies and we share it in our stories. If you're not listening, you're gonna miss a whole lot of data because we tell you a lot, just like you were saying, even if it's an adaptive thing, right? But to go back to what you were just saying, Nicole, I think that those y'all watching should really understand. I'm on the far end of the spectrum. I must continue to say, I'm a mental health decolonizer. I go to war every day, joy centered. It brings me a lot of joy. I got a whole crew behind me, but we really are like, we don't care about no bike lanes. We want to change the whole street, right? So I say that buffering what I'm about to say, but so I don't feel like we can assess if there's a stigma accurately because we haven't built a mental health system that looks like us. We haven't built one that looks like our values, that looks like our community. We have to think that prior to colonization, prior to enslavement, prior to European dominance in these ways, it wasn't that we weren't taking care of ourselves. I mean, it's that the way we took care of ourselves was communal, and that it was spirit-led, and it was integrated with our spirituality. It was integrated with our relationship with nature, and it was integrated with our relationship with each other. We have not constructed a model for mental health that mirrors that. And if we did, I think their biggest fear is that it won't look like what they set up. It would look like village. It would look like community. It would look like land. It would look like that. You can't separate our mental health from our social justice. It's impossible. I always tell Black people, I can't even know the real you unless I move you into another country where you're completely affirmed and loved. And then I see, okay, now what's going on with you? It's really hard for me to assess you here because I know what you have to deal with. So in this room, in this space, in this healing circle, whatever we've created, I have to give you full permission to be your fullest self so that I can see you in the light of day. And from there, we talk about how you carry this being into that world, no matter what. So someone asked, how do you do this in the work mode? Listen, I'm not the one to ask. I think I don't know what people get fired. You understand? I am a special being. I am a child of Oya. I wreck shop, right? Don't follow me. But I'm telling you, that I've had supervisors who will, because I've always worked with Reiki practitioners. I'm level 2 Reiki certified. I work with stones. I work with Afro spirituality. There's been times when just because I have an E-day on, I can see a client has an E-day and I'm like, I know what you practice because you would only know that by certain indications. And I'm grateful that spirit put me in that place and my ancestors led me to that practice so that I could know that about that person who was about to be hospitalized until I talked to them, right? And so I've had directors of my jobs at universities, some of the whitest spaces you could think of, be like, well, Thea, we're therapists, we're not shaman. I said, well, some of us are both. And I kept a job. In fact, let me tell you, not only did I keep a job, but they rehire me and paying me to consult because I quit and I got a new job and I went somewhere else. So, I mean, I don't know. Don't follow my path, but I will say that someone, and that someone is typically a client, is waiting for you to show up as your fullest self, no matter what space you're in. And there's certain levels of treatment that you can't even give people until you fully authorize yourself. And so now that I've left that space, I have like 5 coworkers that are there going hard in the paint about all this social justice, mental health stuff that I was the only one advocating for. They're calling me like, we're going to do this and we're implementing this. I had clients that would come in who it was my full authorization that they were coming for. When people see a liberated person, they want to know how to do that. And so, Course in Miracles talks about that. Like, you heal with the client. The client can only be as healed as you are. And the part of me I've really chose to focus on healing is my liberation. Like, I want to be completely free so that people who come to me, I feel like that's what they're seeking. And the healing is baked into that freedom, if that makes sense.
And I agree. Danielle and I talk about this all the time. Showing up as your authentic self is more liberating. And I want to be clear, it's not easy, right? Because you have to first know your authentic self to show up as your authentic self. And it's a pathway, it's a journey. So there is no, I know it now, right? Because who you are at 20 is definitely not who you be at 30, right? So it's an evolution, And so I agree with that. And I wanted to go back to something that Nicole said and that Thea touched on is, again, when we use words like stigma, I will ask the question, says who? Because what is stigma? When you build it for the right people, they will come. And so I think a long time in mental health, we have said Black people there's stigma against mental health. They don't want to show up, right? And I'm like, well, did we build it to oppress? What did we build it for? Now, is it maybe difficult to be vulnerable? Yes. Is that a Black thing? No. Right? So there's no stigma there. That's an everybody thing of all the people that I see. And one of my mentors, Dr. Breland Noble, we call her Dr. Alfie. I had the honor of working on a book chapter with her where we talked about when there's stigma, when there's different things that people have created, like school-based mental health, well, then there was no stigma for young people anymore because they can come to it in their school, right? When you do apps and people are able to get therapy on the apps, then there's no stigma anymore about people having to go in. Like stigma is kind of a product of what we create, right? But when you build things for people, so I personally don't believe that there's a lot of stigma about mental health in the Black community. And through my research, I have found that like when people understand what it is, then they're like, okay, what we created is barriers that make it difficult to people to see, how do I relate to this? How do I resonate with this? Which is why they won't come. And I think about, I'm sure y'all have seen this quote. It's been all over social media when people are like, diversity is being invited to the dance. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And the question that I ask people is like, well, who dances with people that they don't know? I don't, right? Like if I'm in a space somewhere, I don't just start, I'm like, oh, let me get close to you, share my space with you and do all these things with somebody that I don't know, right? And that's the same thing with therapy. When we include people and then we say, well, we included them, right? But did you create a space to get to know them, to see what they needed, to talk to them, to say, hey, we have something in common. Now I want to hang out with you. I want to build something with you, right? That's so different. And we've all been in those spaces. I'm sure everybody on here, you've been to a party, a kickback, a social gathering, where it's a whole lot of people who look like each other, and you think you might have things in common, and everybody's in their own pocket. Everybody's separate, right? And then once people realize there's something in common, they start talking to each other, right? To me, that's stigmas. Once I realize how I resonate with you, then I join with you. But until I know, then I'm like, no, that's not for me.
Yeah, and also to add to that, notice that was exactly, that's such a good scenario. I'm going to reference you. I'm going to quote you from that because we cite Black women, people. We cite Black women. Okay, just make sure we're in agreement. So the notice. I also notice how much more comfortable they are with throwing out the word stigma as opposed to racism. That's my point, right? They'll put stigma as a reason, as a barrier, but they do not put racism as a barrier. I check every year, okay? And we all, I mean, the reason I focus on the APA is simply because that's where our DSM comes from, that most of us, that we use to diagnose, right? So if you made yourself this governing body, you're going to be held to a higher standard, right? And so if in the same diversity report that is talking about stigma being a barrier, not enough people of color, language barriers, you're naming all the things, but you're not saying the thing that they're all rooted in. And that is interesting to me, right? That is telling, that is data, as Dr. Jessica Jackson, my new friend, would say. That is data, that you are comfortable talking about my stigma. You're comfortable saying Black voters don't turn out as opposed to saying voter suppression. This is what we're doing. This is what we're not doing past these 2020s with a Black woman vice president. Okay, this is what's not happening anymore. We are going to say the thing. We are going to say the word Black. We are going to say the word racism. We are going to say the thing. And we are not going to put it on Black people as though the stigma is something and see, this is why we leave thinking it's us. If you had a therapist that was like, no, boo, we are responsible for creating a healing space that works in accordance to your values, because we have said that this is what we do and this is who we are. And if we have failed to do that, then we are going to take responsibility. We are not going to call you resistant. We're to therapy. We are not going to make up all these, and we're not going to call you angry, right? Closed off. We're not going to do that, because we recognize that we just have to do more work then to make it so that you feel safe and comfortable to heal in this space.
Whew. I want this conversation to continue. We're like at 12:50 and I'm looking at the clock like I cannot believe it, because you all dropped so many gems, and we do want to thank you for opening up the conversation in this way. I think you spoke on so many things in terms of how we think about mental health, who it was normed on, who is it serving, what needs to happen to make these changes, and not just, I think, individually we're all doing our work, but we need that collective change for our people. I think it was you, Dr. Jackson, that said, if people knew, like so many people come to therapy and then at the end they're like, oh, I didn't know that this is what it was. And it's because having Black therapists matter. And we need that to be said over and over and over again. I can't think of how many times I'm like, I can't even start working with a person without incorporating who they are. So it doesn't matter what your theories are or what you want me to do. I need to get to this part first. And so I think it just lends to the changes that we need to make in the mental health field. I think it shapes how we think about mental health and the work that we need to continue to do. So I thank you all for that. It is 12:50, so we're supposed to be on a break. So for the attendees, there is a live expo happening right now with Creative Culture. So you can go there and see what she has. She has lots of candles, intention oils, incense, clothing, apparel, and she'll tell you about her jewelry. She'll tell you about some of her stuff. We also have networking opportunities. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll have a next set of presenters. So again, Dr. Jessica, Thea Monyee, like this was great. I kind of wanted to keep going. But thank you so much for having us. And if people want to get in contact with you, can you just tell them really quickly how they would do that?
First of all, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. I am honored to be on the stage with other Black women who are working to not just change ourselves, but essentially change the world. So I am honored to be here. And thank you all for listening. You can reach me. I have my website at www.drjlauren.com. I'm also at Dr. J. Lauren on Instagram. So either one of those will give you contact information to be able to reach out to me. Also on Twitter, original Dr. J, because I'm a basketball fan. So those who get that reference, y'all are my people.
And you can reach me. Thank you. Also, thank you. This was a great conversation. I will be looking you all up and tagging you for one of my initiatives, which is the Blacker the Brain, which is our decolonizing mental health movement and conversation and cohort. We are creating documentation. We are creating curriculum. So we are very excited, and mentorship opportunities for grad students. So we're very excited, and I will be contacting you all. And so you can reach me at Thea Monyee, TheaMonyee. And that will, if you reach me there on Instagram, my website is the same, theamonyee.com. It'll lead you to my company and all the work that we're doing.